Hello and welcome back. So in the previous video, we've designed the requirement, right? We've understood the requirement that we have to build two APIs, and you also designed that on the PowerPoint, right? So we know exactly how many steps we have to take, right? Let's quickly review the design before we get started. So this is how the design looks like, right? So we have to build two logic apps and we have to build two different stored procedures to retrieve different types of data based on the request, right? So let's get started. Okay, so this is the item table that we've been given, right? We've been given the access to the table so that we can create stored procedures based on the requirement. I'm going to break this requirement into three different segments, right? In the first segment, we are going to build the first store procedure. Step one, build the store procedure that would retrieve items by category, right? So here you would be provided in the request, you would be given a category code and you would use that category code and retrieve all of the items under that category. Once we build that store procedure, then we'll build the logic app. That logic app would be actually API that would call this store procedure, right? So the logic app would receive the category code as a request and then would pass that category code to the store procedure, would connect to the database and would retrieve the results and then will return that result back to the request as a response. In the second segment, we'll do the exact same thing with the second API. So we will first build the second store procedure, then we'll build the logic app API. And once both of these APIs are ready, we'll test them individually and then we'll publish them via the API management portal that we previously built in our API exercises. Right, let's get started with the segment one. So first of all, we have to start by building the stored procedure. So let's log on to the SQL Server. So here I've already connected to the SQL database, which has the item table. And this is how the select statement looks like, right? So if I select everything from this table, then it returns me all of the data stored in this table. Now I've given the sample SQL file .sql file that you can use to create this table along with this data, right? So use this test data to build your APIs. So this is the item table and I have to build a stored procedure that would retrieve all of the items based on the category code. But remember, I don't have to return everything, right? I just have to return few key fields from this table. So let's get started with creating the store procedure. So I'll go to the programmability in the store procedure. I'll right click and create new store procedure. Okay, and I'm going to name this store procedure items by category, right? So select items by category. That will be my store procedure name that goes here, right? And I'm following this naming convention. USP means it's a user created store procedure, and then USP underscore select items by category, right? And then here comes all the input parameters, right? So the input parameter we are getting here is category code, and the type of this, let's check the type of this field in the table, which is integer. Let's use the same type as the column name, right? Okay, this is the input parameter called category code. And now here we have to write the select statement. Okay, let's go back to the table structure and let's see how many fields we can return as part of this select statement. Right? We have to return the item ID. Let's copy and paste them here so that we can use that directly in the stored procedure. So item ID would be first. Then we also want to return the title we also want to return the description and the price and couple of images, right? So remember, this is the first call, right? So when you go on any mobile app and you select one category and then it displays a list of items, it doesn't display everything about that item, but it only displays few things like couple of images and then what's the name, what's the short description, and how much does it cost. So these are the enough parameters that we can return as part of this stored procedure. So I'm going to put that in the select statement. Select these fields from the table name is dbo.item table, item table, and we also have to put the where condition, right? Where category code is equal to whatever category code we received in the input. There we go. This is the simplest stored procedure, right? I'm not doing a lot of enhancements in this stored procedure right now for the exercise purpose. So what we're going to do is as soon as this stored procedure is called, it would have category code as an input. We would use that as a condition, right? So from this table, whatever items have the category code equal to whatever category code we received as a request, those items would be returned with these parameters. Okay, let's execute so that the stored procedure is created for us. That's done. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start by creating the LogicApp API. Let's go back to the Azure portal, click on LogicApps, and let's start by creating a new LogicApp. And let's select the resource group CI101. Let's give it a descriptive name, but we have been given the name, so we can use the same name, items by category. All right, let's use the same name, but I'm going to give it name of get items by category so that it's more, you can easily tell just by the name that what exactly this LogicApp will do. And we'll leave everything as default. Let's go ahead and create this LogicApp. There we go, it's ready for us. Let's go to resource. This is the page where it shows you all the templates, right? So you can either choose the template to begin with, and in our case we have to make this LogicApp as an API, so we'll choose this HTTP request as a template. So that would start by having the trigger of HTTP request, right? Okay, now here you see this is a post URL, right? So by default it starts with a post, but if you want to change this to get, which in our case we have to make it a get API, right? Because we're not posting any data, we're actually requesting data. So you can change that by choosing the method here, right? So now it allows you to choose the method of this API, and let's choose get as the method. There are a couple of ways you can receive the request parameters. You can have them as a parameter, or you can have them as a request body. But because this is just one parameter, right, and we've already experienced the request body, let's go ahead and try the request parameters. So the request input would be part of the URL, API URL itself. So let's go ahead and select a new parameter and select relative path. Relative path is where you can define your input parameters, right? Let's select relative path, and then here in the relative path I'm going to give it a name of category code, and let's save this so that it would generate the API endpoint for us. Okay, let's save this. And there we go. You see the HTTP get URL. It changed from post to get now. And you also have your API endpoint. And if you copy this endpoint and if you inspect this closely, you would see that the input parameter would be part of this endpoint itself. There we go, category code, right? This is where you have to pass the category code. Okay, so let's go back to the Logic app. And the next step we have to do is we have to pass this category code to the stored procedure request. So the next action is going to be a SQL connector, right? So let's choose SQL as a connector. First of all, you can search here SQL and it would give you the options of SQL Server. And these are all the actions you can choose. While we have already created this stored procedure, let's go ahead and select execute stored procedure command. And there we go, it's asking you to create the connection, right? So let's go ahead and create the SQL connection. This is just one time because it's a new database. We have to create the connection and then next time onwards, you can use that connection, right? So let's create a SQL connection. I've given it a name of SQL con. I'm choosing SQL Server Authentication and let's find out the server name. So this is the server name, LON360SQL.database. Let me type in here so that I can simply copy LON360SQL.database.windows.net. Let's copy this and use this as a connection string. That's the server name. The database name is itemdb. And I'm going to use my username. And you can use your respective username if you've created one. Okay, and we don't need to use any gateway because our database is also on Azure. Let's go ahead and create this connection. There we go. The connection is created. So now we have to select the name of the server. Let's use this drop down. And there we go. This is the name of the server. Second, we choose the database, right? It's going to be the itemdb database. Now in this drop down, it would show you all the available databases, right? But you have to also define that when you're creating the connection. So when we're creating this connection, we chose this explicit server name and this one database. So we can only select this one database using this connection. And now we have to select this stored procedure, right? So if you remember, we've already created this stored procedure. Let's see if we can see that in the drop down. And there we go. USP_select item by category, right? Let's select that stored procedure. And as soon as you select this stored procedure, here you can see that it's asking you to choose the parameter, right? Because we've selected one input parameter when we designed the stored procedure. So let's do this drop down and see it's asking you for that one parameter, which is category code. So now we can pass the value to this category code input parameter in this stored procedure. And we are receiving this category code as a parameter in the endpoint itself. And because this is all integrated in Logic app, right here, if you click on this category code, now it would show you that option is available to you right here, right? So when the HTTP request is received, let's click on see more. If you click on the see more, it would show you the option of cat code, right? This is the relative path. And because we have already defined this relative path here, it's already giving us the option to use that. So let's select that relative path. That is the category code. There we go. So now, as soon as this API is invoked, the Logic app would extract the category code and would pass that as an input to this stored procedure. Now what we want to do is whatever we receive as a response from this stored procedure, we want to pass that as a response to the API, right? So let's go ahead and select the response action. So in the next action, select the request. And as part of the request, it would allow you to select the response. Here we go, this request API. And now in the actions, it would show you the response, right? Let's select this response action. We want to return 200 as the status code. And as part of the body, let's see what we received from this execute stored procedure action. So on the dynamic window now, it's showing you all of the options that you can choose from, right? These are all the output of the execute stored procedure action. Let's see what are there that we can use. So there are output parameters, result set items, result set return code, right? Item ID, title. So you can choose individual items. You can use those individual items to redesign your response. But in our case, what we'll do is we'll simply select this table 1, result set table 1, right? Let's select that and hit save. Now, because this is a GET request, we can simply call this API using the browser itself. We don't even have to use the Postman for this, right? Let's see how we can do that. Let's copy this endpoint. Let's open that in another tab. Okay, and here you can see this cat code as an input parameter, right? We have to pass the category code. So let's go and find a sample category code from the database itself. So we have the select statement open, right? So we can pass anything from this category code column. Let me select 201 and let's pass 201 as part of this request. And if we hit enter, then there we go. So it has called the logic app. The logic app in turn called the store procedure, and you received this data, the JSON data, as a response from the logic app, right? Now let's go to the logic app and see the run history. So we can click on the name of the logic app, and if we refresh, there we go. The last, it was called at 12:13. Let's click on this. Okay, and let's see what was the category code that we received. So here the relative path is category code, and let's see what was received. Category code as 201, right? And it passed that as a category code input to this stored procedure request. The stored procedure return this response back, right? And then we selected table 1. So whatever was received as part of table 1, it was sent as a response. There we go. This is the response, right? So it's well formatted JSON. It returned all of the items with category code equal to 201. Let's give it another try. Let's select 204, for example. 204, and there we go. We received all the items for 204. Let's refresh the run history and let's check that. There we go. This is category code is equal to 204, and the response is this JSON, right? So we built the first API. In the next video, let's create the second segment where we'll do the exact same thing. We'll first create the store procedure. We'll use the logic app to call that store procedure. See you in the next one. Thank you.